This is The First Century, a podcast devoted to stories from that influential period of history including Rome, Judea, Christianity, and more. I'm your host, Dr. Brian Schmisek. Get ready to go back in time and enter a world before computers, the stagecoach, the printing press, or even stirrups had been invented for horses. We're about to enter the first century. Episode 19. Agrippa's Discontent and Tiberius's Musings about an Heir. Antipas had provided an office, a magistrate, and an income for his brother-in-law Agrippa, who was rather dismissive and not at all appreciative. Agrippa wanted out, but he was in such debt that he felt trapped. At a banquet in Tyre, to which Antipas had invited Agrippa, things came to a head. After some drinking, Agrippa complained about his condition, the terrible circumstances he faced, and how things were not as good here as they had been in Rome. Antipas, in turn, made some belittling remarks about how Agrippa was completely provided for. He was a kept man, and Antipas himself was keeping him. Agrippa's belly was full of the food that Antipas himself supplied. Agrippa would be nothing without Antipas's generosity. Agrippa could take no more of this humiliation. He abruptly left for Roman Syria to see his old friend from Rome, Lucius Pomponius Flaccus, who had been appointed governor after a successful consulship, which ended with a 2-day drinking feast with Tiberius and Piso, the man who was now prefect of the city of Rome. Flaccus was only too happy to see his old friend Agrippa. They shared stories about Rome, and Flaccus regaled him with the tale of the 2-day drinking fest with Tiberius and Piso, which ended with Flaccus being named governor of Syria. However, in bad timing for Agrippa, Flaccus was already hosting Aristobulus, another brother of Agrippa. Aristobulus was not ready to share his host, but he did have the patience to wait for an opportune moment to strike. About this time, there was a dispute between Damascus and Sidon. The Damascenes knew that Agrippa was friendly with Flaccus, so they asked to hire him as what we would call today a lobbyist or an advocate, and they were willing to spend a great deal of money on this. Due in large part to his indebtedness, Agrippa jumped at the chance and eagerly accepted. At various events and in private moments, Agrippa spoke eloquently on behalf of the Damascenes to Flaccus, without disclosing that he had accepted significant funds to do so. When the case came forward, Flaccus took pains to hear each side of the story. Agrippa, of course, supported Damascus, and it was then that Aristobulus pounced. He accused Agrippa of only siding with Damascus for money, advocating on their behalf to Flaccus, but without disclosing the large sum he had received for that service. Flaccus was inflamed. He would not be used or played. He dismissed Agrippa from his presence. Aristobulus had won the battle, and remained with his generous host, Flaccus. With nowhere left to turn, Agrippa decided to return to Rome with his wife Cypros, where he hoped that Tiberius would have finished mourning the death of his son Drusus and welcomed Drusus's old friends again. After all, Sejanus, the perpetrator of the crime, was now dead because of it. But to make their way to Rome, Agrippa and Cypros needed cash. So, before departing from Judea, he secured 20,000 drachmas, less a 2,500 drachma deposit, which was a standard lending fee at the time. Flush with at least some cash, Agrippa and Cypros went to Anthedon, the Judean port city near Jamnia. Unfortunately for Agrippa and Cypros, Anthedon was under the control of the procurator of Jamnia, and that meant it was managed directly by the empire. Jamnia had been given to Herod the Great's sister Salome after his death decades earlier, and after Salome's death, the city went to Livia, wife of Augustus, making it an imperial property. After Livia's death in 31, Jamnia went to Tiberius. Herennius Capito served as procurator of Jamnia and therefore reported directly to the emperor. Moreover, he knew that Agrippa owed 300,000 drachmas to the imperial treasury from debts that he had incurred at Rome. Capito, keenly aware that he might be rewarded handsomely by Tiberius for securing this debt from Agrippa, sent a squad of soldiers to extract the sum and to forbid the ship from leaving port. Agrippa agreed and said that he would certainly pay the debt. But that night, in a stealthy move, he cut the ropes mooring the ship and slipped away. Capito, not to be outdone, sent a letter to Tiberius, making him aware of the situation. Agrippa made his way along the coast to Alexandria, Egypt, where he met Alexander Lysimachus, the port official known as the Alabarch, and he was responsible for taxation and custom fees. Alexander Lysimachus happened to be a brother to Philo, an influential Jewish intellectual, and Alexander also knew Antonia, the mother of Germanicus, Livilla, and Claudius, as he had acted as Antonia's steward years earlier. Alexander knew Agrippa's reputation for spending money and was not willing to lend him any. But Cypros made such an impression on Alexander as one who was completely devoted to her husband that Alexander lent her the money, 200,000 drachmas. In the spring of 36, then, Agrippa left for Italy, whereas his wife and children returned to Judea. It was around this time when Tiberius, still on the island of Capri, changed his will and named both Gaius and young Gemellus as co-heirs, though he was certainly aware of a potential rivalry. On one occasion, when Tiberius was with both of them, he looked at Gaius while holding Gemellus and then said, "You will kill him, and another will kill you." Gaius knew that Tiberius had persecuted his family and quite possibly had poisoned his father Germanicus. In his own mind, Gaius had determined to kill Tiberius in his sleep. Once, Gaius crept into Tiberius's room and stood over him with a dagger, summoning up the courage to do the deed when he heard the voice of the deceased Augustus say, "Let nature take its course." So Gaius slipped out of the room. Even so, Tiberius suspected that Gaius was acting strangely, and he was concerned. Tiberius talked with Macro about it, surreptitiously inquiring of Macro about Gaius' state of mind. Tiberius was truly concerned that should he die, leaving Gaius and Gemellus as co-heirs, Gaius might have a mind to kill Gemellus. But now, Tiberius was rethinking his will again. Wouldn't Gemellus, Tiberius's own grandson by blood, make a better emperor? But Gemellus was too young at this point, only about 15 years old. Besides, when he really thought about it, Tiberius wasn't really sure that Gemellus was actually Drusus' son. There was a chance that Livilla had been impregnated by Sejanus. What was an emperor to do? Tiberius was also troubled by Gaius' antisocial behaviors, his moody and cruel disposition, and his unstable temperament. Macro, whose wife Antonia was now fully engaged in an affair with Gaius and hoped to be married to him if and when he became emperor, defended Gaius' reputation before Tiberius, saying that Gaius was a good person who was obedient to the princeps. And, Macro claimed, Gaius had tremendous affection for Gemellus. Tiberius was not convinced. Macro went further to say, "I myself will see to Gemellus' security. I'm your friend, Tiberius, and I carried out your wishes when it came to Sejanus. You can trust me." In the end, Tiberius left the will alone with the two named co-heirs. Next time, we'll hear about Roman problems with the Parthians and how Herod Antipas helped to resolve them. Herod Agrippa, on the other hand, presses his luck and is imprisoned on orders of Tiberius.